Okay, this is an audio version of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Chapter 1. Thoughts are Things. The man who thought his way into partnership with Thomas A. Edison. Truly, thoughts are things, and powerful things at that, when they are mixed with definiteness of purpose, persistence, and a burning desire for their translation into riches or other material objects. Some years ago, Edward C. Barnes discovered how true it is that men really do think and grow rich. His discovery did not come about in one sitting. It came little by little, beginning with a burning desire to become a business associate of the great Edison. One of the chief characteristics of Barnes' desire was that it was definite. He wanted to work with Edison, not for him. Observe carefully the description of how he went about translating his desire into reality, and you will have a better understanding of the principles which led to riches. When this desire, or impulse of thoughts, first flashed into his mind, he was in no position to act upon it. Two difficulties stood in his way. He did not know Mr. Edison, and he did not have enough money to pay his railroad fare to Orange, New Jersey. These difficulties were sufficient to have discouraged the majority of men from making any attempt to carry out the desire. But his was no ordinary desire. The inventor and the tramp. He presented himself at Mr. Edison's laboratory and announced he had come to go into business with the inventor. In speaking of the first meeting between Barnes and Edison years later, Mr. Edison said, "He stood there before me, looking like an ordinary tramp, but there was something in the expression of his face which conveyed the impression that he was determined to get what he had come after." I had learned from years of experience with men that when a man really desires a thing so deeply that he is willing to stake his entire future on a single turn of the wheel in order to get it, he is sure to win. I gave him the opportunity he asked for because I saw he had made up his mind to stand by until he succeeded. Subsequent events proved that no mistake was made. It could not have been the young man's appearance which got him the start in the Edison office, for that was definitely against him. It was what he thought. That's what counted. Barnes did not get his partnership with Edison on his first interview. He did get a chance to work in the Edison offices at a very nominal wage. Months went by. Apparently nothing happened to bring nearer the coveted goal which Barnes had set up in his mind as his definite major purpose. But something important was happening in Barnes' mind. He was constantly intensifying his desire to become the business associate of Edison. Psychologists have correctly said that when one is truly ready for a thing, it puts in its appearance. Barnes was ready for a business association with Edison. Moreover, he was determined to remain ready until he got that which he was seeking. He didn't say to himself, "Oh well, what's the use, I guess I'll change my mind and try for a salesman job." But he did say, "I came here to go into business with Edison, and I'll accomplish this end if it takes the remainder of my life." He meant it. What a different story men would have to tell, if only they would adopt a definite purpose and stand by that purpose until it had time to become an all-consuming obsession. Maybe young Barnes did not know at the time, but his bulldog determination, his persistence in standing back of a single desire, was destined to mow down all opposition and bring him the opportunity he was seeking. Sly disguises of opportunity. When the opportunity came, it appeared in a different form and from a different direction from that which Barnes had expected. That is one of the tricks of opportunity. It has a sly habit of slipping in by the back door. Often it comes disguised in the form of misfortune or temporary defeat. Perhaps that is why so many fail to recognize opportunity. Mr. Edison had just perfected a new office device known at the time as the Edison dictating machine. His salesmen were not enthusiastic over the machine. They did not believe it could be sold without great effort. Barnes saw his opportunity. It had crawled in quietly, hidden in a queer-looking machine which interested no one but Barnes and the inventor. Barnes knew he could sell the Edison dictating machine. He suggested this to Edison and promptly got his chance. In fact, he sold it so successfully that Edison gave him a contract to distribute it and market it all over the nation. Out of that business association, Barnes made himself rich in money. But he did something infinitely greater. He proved that one really may think and grow rich. How much actual cash that original desire of Barnes was worth to him, I have no way of knowing. Perhaps it brought him $2 or $3 million. But the amount, whatever it is, becomes insignificant when it's compared with the greater asset he acquired in the form of definite knowledge that an intangible impulse of thought can be transmuted into material rewards by the application of known principles. Barnes literally thought himself into partnership with the great Edison. He thought himself into a fortune. He had nothing to start with except the capacity to know what he wanted and the determination to stand by that desire until he realized it. 3 feet from gold. One of the most common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is overtaken by temporary defeat. Every person is guilty of this mistake at one time or another. An uncle of R.U. Darby was caught by the gold fever in the gold rush days and went to dig and grow rich. He had never learned that more gold has been mined from the thoughts of men than has ever been taken from the earth. He staked a claim and went to work with a pick and shovel. After weeks of labour, he was rewarded by the discovery of the shining ore. He needed machinery to bring the ore to the surface. Quietly, he covered up the mine, retraced his footsteps to his home in Williamsburg, Maryland, and told his relatives and a few neighbours of the strike. They got together money for the needed machinery and had it shipped. The uncle and Darby went back to work the mine. The first car of ore was mined and shipped to a smelter. The returns proved that they had one of the richest mines in Colorado. A few more cars of the ore would clear the debt. Then would come the big killing in profits. Down went the drills, up went the hopes of Darby and uncle. Then something happened. The vein of gold ore disappeared. They had come to the end of the rainbow. The pot of gold was no longer there. They drilled on, desperately trying to pick up the vein again. All to no avail. Finally they decided to quit. They sold the machinery to a junkman for a few $100s and took the train back home. The junkman called in a mining engineer to look at the mine and do a little calculating. The engineer advised that the project had failed because the owners were not familiar with fault lines. His calculations showed that the vein would be found just 3 feet from where the Darbys stopped drilling. And that is exactly where it was found. The junkman took millions of dollars in ore from the mine because he knew enough to seek expert counsel before giving up. I will never stop because men say no. Long afterward, Mr. Darby recouped his losses many times over when he made the discovery that desire can be transmuted into gold. The discovery came after he went into business selling life insurance. Remembering that he had lost a huge fortune because he had stopped 3 feet from gold, Darby profited by the experience in his chosen work by the simple method of saying to himself, I stopped 3 feet from gold, but I will never stop because men say no when I ask them to buy insurance. Darby became one of a small group of men who sell over $1 million in life insurance annually. He owed his stickability to the lesson he learnt from his quitability in the gold mining business. Before success comes to any man's life, he's sure to meet with temporary defeat, and perhaps some failure. When defeat overtakes a man, the easiest and most logical thing to do is quit. And that is exactly what the majority of men do. More than 500 of the most successful men in this country have told the author their greatest success came just one step beyond the point at which defeat had overtaken them. Failure is a trickster, with a keen sense of irony and cunning. It takes great delight in tripping one, when success is almost within reach. A 50-cent lesson in persistence. Shortly after Mr. Darby received his degree from the University of Hard Knocks, and had decided to profit by his experience in the gold mining business, he had the good fortune to be present on an occasion that proved to him that no does not necessarily mean no. One afternoon he was helping his uncle grind wheat in an old-fashioned mill. The uncle operated a large farm on which a number of coloured sharecrop farmers lived. Quietly the door was opened, and a small coloured girl, the daughter of a tenant, walked in and took her place near the door. The uncle looked up, saw the child, and barked at her roughly. "What do you want?" Meekly the child replied, "My mummy say send her 50 cents. "I'll not do it," the uncle retorted. "Now you run on home." "Yes, sir," the child replied, but she didn't move. The uncle went ahead with his work, so busily engaged that he did not pay enough attention to the child to notice that she didn't leave. When he looked up and saw her still standing there, he yelled at her, "I told you to go home. Now go, or I'll take a switch to you." The girl said, "Yes, sir," but she didn't budge. The uncle dropped a sack of grain he was about to pour into the mill hopper, picked up a barrel stave, and started towards the child with an expression on his face that indicated trouble. Darby held his breath. He was certain he was about to witness an assault. He knew his uncle had a fierce temper. When the uncle reached the spot where the child was standing, she quickly stepped forward one step, looked up into his eyes, and screamed at the top of her shrill voice, "My mummy's got to have that 50 cents. The uncle stopped, looked at her for a minute, and then slowly laid the barrel stave on the floor, put his hand in his pocket, took out $50 and gave it to her. The child took the money and slowly backed towards the door, never taking her eyes off the man who she had just conquered. After she had gone, the uncle sat down on the box and looked out the window into space for more than 10 minutes. He was pondering with awe over the whipping he had just taken. Mr. Darby too was doing some thinking. That was the first time in all his experience that he'd seen a coloured child deliberately master an adult white person. How did she do it? What happened to his uncle that caused him to lose his fierceness and become as docile as a lamb? What strange power did this child have that made her the master of this situation? These and other simple questions flashed into Darby's mind, but he didn't find the answer until years later, when he told me the story. Strangely, the story of the unusual experience was told to the author in the old mill, on the very spot where the uncle took his whipping. As we stood there in the musty old mill, Mr. Darby repeated the story of the unusual conquest, and finished by asking, "What can you make of it? What strange power did that child use that so completely whipped my uncle?" The answer to this question will be found in the principles described in this book. The answer is full and complete. It contains details and instructions sufficient to enable anyone to understand and apply the same force which the little girl accidentally stumbled upon. Keep your mind alert, and you will observe exactly what strange power came to the rescue of the child. You will catch a glimpse of this power in the next chapter. Somewhere in the book you will find an idea that will quicken your receptive powers, and place at your command for your own benefit the same irresistible power. The awareness of this power may come to you in the first chapter, or it may flash into your mind in a subsequent chapter. It may come in the form of a single idea, or it may come in the nature of a plan or a purpose. It may cause you to go back into your past experiences of failure or defeat and bring to the surface some lesson by which you can regain all that you lost through defeat. After I had described to Mr. Darby the power unwittingly used by the little coloured girl, he quickly retraced his 30 years of experience as a life insurance salesman and frankly acknowledged that his success in that field was due, in no small degree, to the lesson he had learned from this child. Mr. Darby pointed out, every time a prospect tried to bow me out without buying, I saw that child standing there in the old mill, her big eyes glaring in defiance, and I said to myself, I've got to make this sale. The better portion of all sales I've made were made after people had said no. He recalled too his mistake in having stopped only 3 feet from gold. But, he said, that experience was a blessing in disguise. It taught me to keep on keeping on, no matter how hard the going may be, a lesson I needed to learn before I succeed in anything. The story of Mr. Darby and his uncle, the child and the gold mine, doubtless will be read by hundreds of men who make their living by selling life insurance, and to all of these the author wishes to offer the suggestion that Darby owes these 2 experiences his ability to sell more than $1 million of life insurance every year. Mr. Darby's experiences were commonplace and simple enough, yet they held the answer to his destiny in life. Therefore they were as important to him as life itself. He profited by these 2 dramatic experiences because he analysed them and found the lessons that they taught. But what of the man who has neither the time nor the inclination to study failure in search of knowledge that may lead to success? Where and how is he to learn the art of converting defeat into stepping stones to opportunity? In answer to these questions, this book was written. One sound idea is all you need. The answer called for a description of 13 principles. But remember as you read, the answer you may be seeking to the questions which have caused you to ponder over the strangeness of life may be found in your own mind, through some idea, plan or purpose which may spring into your mind as you read this book. One sound idea is all that you need to achieve success. The principles described in this book contain ways and means of creating useful ideas. Before we go further in our approach to the description of these principles, we believe you are entitled to receive this important suggestion. When riches begin to come, they come so quickly, in such great abundance, that one wonders where they have been hiding all of those lean years. This is an outstanding statement, and all the more so when we take into consideration the popular belief that riches come only to those who work long and hard. This is an outstanding statement, and even more so when we take into consideration the popular belief that riches only come to those who work long and hard. When you begin to think and grow rich, you will observe that riches begin with a state of mind, with definiteness of purpose, and with little or no hard work. You and every other person ought to be interested in knowing how to acquire that state of mind which will attract riches. I spent 25 years in research because I too wanted to know how wealthy men become that way. Observe very closely. As soon as you master the principles of this philosophy and begin to follow the instructions for applying those principles, your financial status will begin to improve. Everything you touch will begin to transmute itself into an asset for your benefit. Impossible? No, not at all. One of the main weaknesses of mankind is the average man's familiarity with the word impossible. He knows all the rules which will not work. He knows all the things which cannot be done. This book was written for those who seek the rules which make others successful, and are willing to stake everything on those rules. Success comes to those who become success conscious. Failure comes to those who indifferently allow themselves to become failure conscious. The object of this book is to help all who seek to learn the art of changing their minds from failure consciousness to success consciousness. Another weakness found in altogether too many people is the habit of measuring everything and everyone by their own impressions and beliefs. Some people who read this will believe that they cannot think and grow rich, because their thought habits have been steeped in poverty, want, misery, failure and defeat. These unfortunate people remind me of a prominent Chinese person who came to America to be educated in American ways. He attended the University of Chicago. One day President Harper met this young Oriental man on the campus, stopped to chat with him for only a few minutes, and asked him what had impressed him as being the most noticeable characteristic of the American people. "Well," the student exclaimed, "the queer slant of your eyes. Your eyes are off slant." What is it that we say about Chinese people? We refuse to believe that which we do not understand. We foolishly believe that our own limitations are the proper measure of limitations. Sure, the other fellow's eyes are off slant, because they're not the same as ours. The impossible Ford V8 motor. When Henry Ford decided to produce his famous V8 motor, he chose to build an engine with the entire 8 cylinders cast in one block, and instructed his engineers to produce a design for that engine. The design was placed on the paper, but the engineers agreed that it was simply impossible to cast an 8-cylinder engine block in one piece. Ford said, "Produce it anyway." But they said, "It's impossible." "Go ahead," Ford commanded, "and stay on the job until you succeed, no matter how much time is required." The engineers went ahead. There was nothing else for them to do if they wanted to remain on the Ford staff. 6 months went by. Nothing happened. Another 6 months. Still nothing happened. The engineers tried every conceivable plan to carry out the orders, but the thing seemed out of the question. Impossible. At the end of the year, Ford checked with his engineers, and again they informed him that they'd found no way to carry out his orders. "Go right ahead," said Ford. "I want it, I'll have it." They went ahead, and then, as if by a stroke of magic, the secret was discovered. The Ford determination had won once more. The story may not be described with minute accuracy, but the sum and the substance of it is correct. Take from it, you who wish to think and grow rich, the secret of the Ford millions if you can. You won't have to look far. Henry Ford was a success because he understood and applied the principles of success. One of these is desire, knowing what one wants. Remember this Ford story as you read, and pick out the lines in which the secret of his stupendous achievement have been described. If you can lay your finger on the particular group of principles which made Henry Ford rich, you can equal his achievements in almost any calling for which you are suited. Why you are the master of your fate. When Henley wrote the prophetic lines, "I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul," he should have informed us that we are the masters of our fate, the captains of our soul, because we have the power to control our thoughts. He should have told us that our brains become magnetized with the dominating thoughts which we hold in our minds, and, by means with which no man is familiar, these magnets attract to us the forces, the people, the circumstances of life which harmonize with the nature of our dominating thoughts. He should have told us that before we can accumulate riches in great abundance, we must magnetize our minds with intense desire for riches, that we must become money conscious until the desire for money drives us to create definite plans for acquiring it. But being a poet and not a philosopher, Henley contented himself by stating a great truth in prophetic form, leaving those who followed him to interpret the philosopher's meaning of his lines. Little by little the truth has unfolded itself, until it now appears certain that the principles described in this book hold the secret of mastery over our economic fate. Principles that can change your destiny. We are now ready to examine the first of those principles. Maintain a spirit of open-mindedness, and remember as you read that they are the invention of no one man. The principles have worked for many men. You can put them to work for your own enduring benefit. You'll find it easy, not hard to do. Some years ago I delivered the commencement address at Salem College, Salem, West Virginia. I emphasized the principle described in the next chapter with so much intensity that one of the members of the graduating class definitely appreciated it and made it part of his own philosophy. The young man became a congressman and an important factor in Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration. He wrote me a letter in which he clearly stated his opinion of the principle outlined in the next chapter, that I have chosen to publish this letter as an introduction to that chapter. It gives you an idea of the rewards to come. My dear Napoleon, my service as a member of Congress having given me an insight into the problem of men and women, I am writing to offer a suggestion which may become helpful to thousands of worthy people. In 1922, you delivered the commencement address at Salem College, when I was a member of the graduating class. In that address you planted in my mind an idea which has been responsible for the opportunity I now have to serve the people of my state, and will be responsible in a very large measure for whatever success I may have in the future. I recall as though it were yesterday the marvellous description you gave of the method by which Henry Ford, with nothing but little schooling, without a dollar, with no influential friends, rose to great heights. I made up my mind then, even before you had finished your speech, that I would make a place for myself no matter how many difficulties I had to surmount. Thousands of young people will finish their schooling this year and within the next few years. Every one of them will be seeking just one message of practical encouragement as the one I have received from you. They will want to know where to turn, what to do to get started in life. You can tell them, because you have helped to solve the problems of so many people. There are thousands of people in America today who would like to know how they can convert ideas into money. People who must start at scratch, without finances, and recoup their losses. If anyone can help them out, you can. If you publish this book, I would like to own the first copy that comes from the press, personally autographed by you. With best wishes, believe me, cordially yours, Jennings Randolph. 25 years after I made that speech, it was my pleasure to return to the Salem College in 1957. At that time I received an honorary Doctor of Literature degree. Since that time in 1922, I have watched Jennings Randolph rise to become one of the nation's leading airlines executives, a great inspirational speaker, and United States Senator from West Virginia. Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. End of chapter 1.